Joining me now is House Majority Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana and Harris Faulkner, co-host of Outnumbered and host of the Faulkner Focus. This is a duo that has never happened before, and no one is going to think about this ever again except me. Thank you for coming, both of you.
Thank you.
Harris Faulkner, I laid out some opinions of my own, messaging, repetition, grace, friendliness. Anyway, what did you think about all this?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was just the way that he was so prepared to be the person that he is. That, you know, he got defined by the left pretty early on. He had made some stumbles. I talked with the former president about this in one of our interviews. And what we saw last night was growth, transparency. He may not have been fact-checked, but he was willing to fact-check when it was needed, right? But he was fact-checked by a crew that didn't do it evenly, and he didn't take the bait on that. So that, to me, just shows someone who knows who they are. And in that moment, you called it presidential timber. I just call it self-awareness and knowing the audience. And the audience right now is hurting. The audience right now is understanding when he doesn't say, I grew up in a middle class, whatever. He says, I was in a working family. They had to work extra hard just for the basics. That's kind of different than the class warfare that we see sometimes politically. But sitting next to Congressman Scalise was like a masterclass, because you were watching the clips and you were nodding, and I've seen you do some of those same things. That friendliness, and I'm not just saying this because you're here and we're making history, according to Larry.
I like the history, by the way.
Right? I know.
It's a great ticket, Larry.
But seriously,
There is no finer person in Washington than Steve Scalise.
Well,
I've known him many years, served with him sometimes in the government. After what he has been through,
Amen.
He's been fighting off tough medical problems, and they took a shot at him at a baseball game, and without any ado, he shows up. I saw it in a wheelchair, yeah, so what? Coming through the Roosevelt Room on a meeting with Trump. Nobody is better than Scalise. Nobody.
Thank you.
And that's seasoning, that's experience. And what we saw last night, with all those years difference, and now I would call him a very young man because I'm older too, it just seemed like he was in his own skin and really feeling it.
Yeah, he really was. Steve, you know, the other thing is, on these crucial policies, it's like one of the things I learned from Reagan a long time ago when I worked for him, don't talk about 8, 10, or 15 policies. Figure out 3 policies, 4 max, and then keep talking about it. I mean, to some extent, I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I think I actually mean it. Politics is a lot like religion. There's a certain amount of repetition involved, so you become a believer, okay? What did he do last night? On all these key issues, take-home pay and low inflation, 11 times. Affordability crisis, 11 times. You should have done this 3.5 years ago, 7 times. I mean, that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, Larry, and by the way, great to be with both you and Harris, and appreciate the kind words. And if you think about last night, you know, for JD especially, for millions of people watching, this was their first real time seeing him. And I think the most important thing that came out of last night was that their first impression of him, okay, they might have seen things on the news and the caricatures from the left and all that foolishness. And then you watched a man who was incredibly focused and disciplined, talking about issues that people really care about in a very calm way, in a very polite way, but smart. And then he got to blend in his life story. He did all of those things, in essence, giving an introduction that he gave at the convention. He did a great job at the convention on his Wednesday night speech. But there were millions of people that didn't watch that speech, that did watch the debate last night. And I think the contrast between him and Walz was very different. Walz was very unhinged, even questions he should have been prepared for. You know, the Tiananmen Square story that he made up that wasn't true. He should have been ready for that. I mean, maybe he just figured the left's not going to ask him any tough questions. They'll only ask JD. But they asked him the question. He wasn't even prepared for it. He didn't even really give an explanation. And then you go to JD, and then, like you said, every question he would bring it right back to the things people care about. The 3 top issues, the border, the higher costs at the grocery store, higher energy costs. What is hurting families is what he talked about, and talked about it from his backstory as somebody who grew up in poverty, who lived the American dream and wants other people to have that same opportunity.
Actually, I should have put in the ref your point about blending in his life story.
Yeah.
Because he came up from a very poor background. We've got some sound. Let's see. You have the American Dream opening. Do we have that? Because I think in there you've got some of his life story. Take a listen to this. Let's roll some tape.
I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again.
Now, I love that. That is pure optimism right at the start. Pure. He also, to Steve's point, before that, we didn't put it in the tape, talked about his humble beginnings. But that's optimism. The American dream. The other day, unfortunately, Kamala Harris said the American dream was not attainable. She said that on the MSNBC interview. I think it was there. Anyhow, he's saying the American dream was there, but we're going to have to change horses. And I think that's a very important point, Harris.
He did something similar that I think really worked well for him last night. He got crisper on that message. What little they did on the economy, by the way. They didn't get into it right away. And that's the number one thing on the list. Second, immigration. And you kind of go from there. The border kind of goes from second to third, depending on what's really rocking right now. But the economy stays atop, and he was crisp on that message about some of the things that he and the former president would do. And he talked about paying for things, which is something that Kamala Harris has really struggled with. Well, you want to give people $25,000 to buy a house, that's going to drive up the cost of the house. How are they going to afford, the insurance? And then the inflation doesn't mean the prices go down when the number of inflation rate comes down. It means they stay where they are and they just rise slower. So the reset that everybody's so thirsty for is not going to happen. We're not going to go back to what they were in 2020. That's not going to happen. You and I have talked about that. That's the affordability crisis that you talk about. I also think that J.D. Vance got crisper on the issue of abortion. And that was something I thought, wow, are Republicans going to be ready for that? Because that's kind of a gotcha point with the left, because that's one of their main messages. It's not in that top three things with American voters, but it's where they know they can win with Kamala Harris. He got crisper, and you know what the difference is, both on the economy and the abortion, from what I could witness last night? He's out. He's getting his reps. He's seeing the American people. He's listening. He's doing the things that Tim Walz really wasn't doing. He's getting pressed in those interviews. Every single interview asks him about what he said in the past. He's getting sharper at that.
He had to explain the Minnesota abortion law.
He actually read the Minnesota law that Tim Walz signed. Walz didn't even know what his own law was.
Unbelievable. Right. It's unbelievable.
You literally had J.D. explaining the Minnesota law to the guy who signed it, and the guy who signed it didn't know what it did. And again, one more example of how he was focused, but what he did, and I think this was so important, as he would respond to a question or even address something that Walz might have brought up, he brought it back to Kamala. Kamala is the presidential nominee. Doesn't matter what Tim Walz thinks, because ultimately what Kamala has done, like you said, 1,400 days ago was her first day in office.
Oh, here.
And now we know the results.
I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to say I'm going to come back. 3.5 years. This was a big thing. Of the things he repeated, besides affordability and besides inflation. Here, I'm going to play some tape because this is just, in my opinion, it's just masterful. Listen to this.
She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans.
I just think, Steve Scalise, that is masterful. And he was relentless on the 3.5 years or the 1,400 days. Yeah. It's actually the point where he doesn't even have to call. He doesn't have to call them names. He doesn't have to say that's a terrible idea. All he said was, "Okay, maybe that's a good idea. You should have done it 1,400 days ago." It's a wonderful touch.
And laying out facts, again, that relate to the problems that people really care about. I mean, I get to go around the country in a lot of these swing districts and swing states. And when you go, you're hearing the same things pop up. Some anomaly of an issue might come up in one state that doesn't come up anywhere else. Everywhere you go, they're talking about the cost of things and how it hurts them, how it limits their ability to provide for their family, maybe to save for their kids' college education. You talk about the border and you hear about the fentanyl deaths, the other things that are related. It's not just the people coming in, taking resources away, being camped up in schools and hotels and trashing hotels when you got veterans. Veterans who served our country sitting out on the street. Right. This is what angers people. This is what affects people. That's what J.D. was talking about to those people. You know, while Walz was all over the board trying to explain how Kamala's got all these great ideas, she's changed her position on everything. And by the way, nobody believes it. She's still against fracking. She's still for open borders. She's still for all of these taxes that are hurting people, even though nobody believes that she's changed her views in the last 3 weeks versus what she's been for the last 20 years.
I know that after hanging out with you two, I'm going to be better. And I would just say this. You become most like the people you spend most of your time with. And what we saw last night was a young man and a senator who spends time with a former president. And what we saw last night was the governor of Minnesota who spends his time with a failed vice presidential candidate on the top 2 or 3 issues voters say that are important to them. You become like the people you're most around. So Tim Walz, I mean, I don't know if he can make up, but I don't know if it matters all that much because I'm not certain that people had the expectation that he was going to be better or different than Kamala.
How many watched, you think? Was it 60 million, 70 million?
Oh, I bet it was probably 50, 60 million. But people say it doesn't matter who the VP is. It absolutely does when you take a look at what is going on in the world right now. We didn't even get to the port strike.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's why I think it moved the needle like you brought up at the beginning.
I think
VP debates rarely do. I think last night did.
Think so.
Because he kept bringing it back to Kamala and how her policies over the last 3.5 years are hurting people today.
People are walking around saying it's the best debate they ever saw.
Well, maybe it'll be 70
Very
million.
interesting to me. Very interesting to me. And if you saw it, I think there was a clear winner. But the point is, this was a historic segment. Historic segment. Majority Leader Steve Scalise and famed Fox News host Harris Faulkner. Absolutely famed. But the teleprompter will run. I'm ready to do the next thing.
I'm bringing
Wait a
cookies
second.
next time.
Be sure and watch Harris
I'll bring some
on the
gumbo.
Faulkner Focus, all right? The Faulkner Focus is weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern on Fox News. Got that done. And, of course, outnumbered.